everybody. New Celtics Beat. And of course, who would you rather be joined by? And I don't mean me, Adam Kaufman. I mean Keith Smith from Spotrac, from Celtics Blog, from a host of other places. In fact, he hosts stuff. He's got his podcast as well. And Keith, I appreciate first and foremost you taking the time to join us on July 1st, because it is the official full day one of free agency after things, as we sit here now, got started last night at 6 o'clock. And it was overall a pretty busy evening, not busy at all for the Celtics, but we do have Celtics news today with the addition, albeit unofficial, but heavily reported, of Danilo Gallinari. We will get to that. There are Thomas Bryant rumors. There's all the Kevin Durant stuff that is happening as well. We'll get to everything. But I mean, just how in general, how hectic a time is this for you right now? And how are you possibly putting any time aside for a, schlub like me and all of our listeners when you should just be glued to your phone?
I mean, I can still be glued to my phone and to TweetDeck and hang out with a self-described schlub. I would not describe you that way. I'm the one who's looking a little schlubby today, I think. But yeah, no, it's this time of year, right? We when you do what I do, you gear up for this, and this is kind of like the Super Bowl in a way for me. So I'm absolutely super excited. It's been a fun couple days. But Celtics are on the board finally. It took them a little bit into day two to get going, but yeah, I'm excited. It's been an interesting free agency period, and there's until Kevin Durant gets traded, there's still we can say a lot more to come.
So normally I, pay all the respect in the world to our guests, and I put my phone off to the side. I don't even look at it while we're recording. But today being the day that it is, I've got it, front and center ahead. I'm looking, all the notifications turned on. I'm keeping an eye on what's happening. So if you see anything, or obviously not just, something from Woj or Shams, but you wanting to break your own news with all the sources you have, if anything comes about, especially if it's Celtics related, don't hesitate to, veer us off course or cut me off or whatever else, because we want to react to all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite TPE target for the Celtics off the board, Kevin Huerter, getting traded to the Sacramento Kings right after we started recording. So I'm a little sad about that.
Yeah, you've been big on Kevin Huerter. We will get to all the TPE stuff, a little bit later on in the show, but obviously that significant news right off the hop there for anyone like yourself that was prioritizing Huerter. I want to mention, by the way, this is completely, it's related to what you do. It's unrelated to what we're going to get into with this show. But I'm of the mind that, I don't know how many people feel this way, but I am of the mind that, it's 2022, right? So inflation, being what it is, gas prices, anything else, it's not like it's 2012 anymore. When you reach 100,000 followers on Twitter, I feel like that's the benchmark of when you've made it. Like any idiot like me can have, in the neighborhood of 40,000 followers. And don't get me wrong, like I'm grateful for it. It's a, respectable number. But I feel like, there are a lot of people like me out there. You get to 100,000. That's a new tier, man. That's when I feel like you are truly influential in the social media space. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate that. And if any of those 100,000 are listening, if you want to each send $1, I'll be very appreciative.
Yeah, thank you for following along. Just a $1 one-time fee.
One time, $1. Yep, that's all I need.
Do it Venmo, tax-free, ideally.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, let's talk Danilo Gallinari, obviously, because that is the big news. And thank you to Brad Stevens, to Danilo, for making your decision between Boston and Chicago, reportedly, before we actually came on to start recording, as opposed to, 5 minutes after. Anyone in the podcast world understands how that works. So greatly appreciative for that, because you never know what's going to happen on July 1st. As far as Gallinari goes, and I tweeted about this. So we spent a lot of time on the show last week, Keith. It was more so, I guess, dealing with TPE targets than it was the mid-level exception, but just the types of players the Celtics would look to add. And I made the point that I would have been, and I guess in the case of Gallo, I am a little bit surprised, despite Brad and Ime and so many others coming out and saying wings and bench scoring, and this is the emphasis, this is the priority this offseason after what we saw in the playoffs and especially in the finals. I didn't think they would add anyone that would be a true defensive liability. That didn't mean that they, everyone had to be elite or anything like that, switchability 1 through 15 or whatever. But, I figured at least like your bottom line was serviceable, like playable on defense. Not, we can't use this guy late in the game in a tight game if we're trying to crack down defensively. And I know the Celtics have more than enough guys that can cover him up and that can play that role. And you're just kind of more looking for regular season depth than anything else to sort of save Tatum and Brown the minutes and that type of thing. What do you think of the Gallinari fit here? Did it surprise you at all?
It like you, I'm a little surprised it went with a guy who's just a poor defender. Let's call it what it is. He's not going to stop anybody, and you're right. They can work around him. They can hide him. They've done a good job with other poor defenders at times. So I'm not overly concerned about that part because I think he's mostly going to be in the game against second units, and his job is going to be score more than you give back. Right. And the other four guys will focus on the give back part. You hang in there, and they've got to get Tatum and Brown's regular season minutes down. Ideally, you want those guys down in the 35 range instead of around 40 in the regular season. And this helps with that. We saw the offense throughout the course of the regular season, but also in the playoffs, really it came to light. They would just grind to a halt at times when the second unit was in the game. And part of that, I think Ime will balance his lineups a little bit better, but I think part of it too is just getting another shooter score. And Brad said, shooting with size, that's been something, he's mentioned. I think Celtics fans should remember Gallo destroyed them.
Yeah.
It hit 10 3-pointers in a game on them and scored 38 points, recently. So that's a thing. He's not quite the off the dribble guy he once was. He's still pretty good there, but he was once really good off the bounce, and he was really good at drawing fouls. A little bit more standstill now than he was, but it's the guy's going to shoot in the high 30s, maybe even 40% from three. Still rebounds okay at his position. He doesn't pile up assists, but he gets how to pass. He's a willing ball mover. So I think this is a pretty good fit. It's funny because I see people being like, yeah, but he can't do this, he can't do that. And I think the reality is when you're talking about a taxpayer mid-level exception signing, and I know we're going to get into minimum signings later, if you can do everything, you're not available for that kind of money.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing that I think gets a little overlooked with this. But yeah, it's one of those ones where I'm not jumping up and down and getting ready to plan a parade, but I don't think this hurts the Celtics at all. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, much like Dennis Schroeder, you move on from a midseason by the trade deadline.
I do want to shout out our producer and often host, Evan Valenti, he's producing today, but he's not on here on this particular show with us. He was spending a lot of time tweeting at Danilo Gallinari last night, all the different places he can go in the North End, get some food, Italian roots, anything to try and make him comfortable. I don't know if he saw those mentions, if that swayed his decision at all, probably not, but nevertheless, shouts to Evan for playing his role. And I have to imagine that Brad Stevens got a congratulatory text from Danny Ainge, because this was a years-long project to put Danilo Gallinari in a Celtics uniform, and Brad was finally the man that pulled it off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I tweeted earlier today that back when I spent more time than I should ever admit to on the Real GM forums, I was, just really. I probably did 1,000 fake trades to get Gallo to the Celtics, and that might even be low. So it's now, yeah, that was 6-7 years ago. It was a different Gallo then, but
Sure.
but I really, this is somebody, yeah, we know they've had their eye on him a couple times in free agency and trades. It looked like they might maybe move on him, and it just never really worked out. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all, like you said, if Brad got a text from Danny saying, hey, you finally pulled it off. It's it is something to celebrate for sure.
Like you said, it's not like Gallinari makes the Celtics worse. I don't want to be like either of us all doom and gloom about this. I think Celtics fans should be excited about this because, as you outlined, as for all the things he's not defensively, he's still a good offensive player, even if, turning 34 next month. He's not a young guy, but he gives you versatility in terms of, he is a wing. He gives you some scoring, gives you some size, a good rebounder, especially for the minutes that he plays, gets you about, 5 rebounds a game and only plays about 25 minutes per. So, you'll certainly happily take that, especially from a guy who's not a a traditional big. I mean, I guess I would caution people to just know, if you do look at the stats, and it's not shocking given his advancing age, but he is offensively on the decline over the last 4 years. The shooting numbers are going down, but overall over those last four, he's still shooting above his career average from three at about 41% on almost 6 attempts per game. So he is a guy who, again, can get you a bucket off the bench, which the Celtics, really at times last year, Keith, and again, you could look at the playoffs, but even in the regular season, sorely missed having a guy like that. We've spent years, basically since Eddie House, saying, how do you get just a microwave? How do you get a bucket getter off the bench for this team to be part of this rotation? So, what type of role, if healthy, if we're painting this picture, the roster with everybody coming back that we expect, barring some monumental trade or something like that, what kind of role do you expect him to play when the rotation seems to be now growing from 8 to maybe 9 guys or so?
Yeah, that part is the key part there. I think growing the rotation to probably somewhere in the range of 9-10 players per night versus doing anything that's in the 8-9 range. Now, this is funny because I've seen some criticism of Ime over the last, really since it looked like some guys ran out of gas in the finals. That hey, wasn't he playing more guys?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because they were under 500 in the middle of January. So at that point, they said, all right, we've got our guys. And then when they went and got Derek White, it was, these are 8 guys. We're going to run with these guys and, we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole. I think this is the type of signing that says, all right, we can knock 2-3 minutes off both Tatum and Brown. We can knock Horford's playing time. I don't want Al Horford to play more than 25 minutes in a game in the regular season ever. I don't care if that means losing a game or two, right? It's just, he should not, log more than 25 minutes in a game. I think there's also although he doesn't play anywhere near the same position or role, there's a Robert Williams impact here as well, because then you slide Horford or even Grant over. I think you've now got the interesting thing with Gallo, what I was hammering with either the TPE or the MLE, you had to get a player who could play the 3 and the 4. And that's what you did. Here, you went and got Gallinari. You can play both positions. The Celtics are basically going to probably say on defense, like, all right, you go cover the weakest guy, and we'll switch around you. We'll figure it out. We'll get into it. In a playoff series, sure, that'll become more targeting. That'll become a little bit bigger of a challenge. But in the playoffs, he's probably a 10 to 15 minute minute per game player. But in the regular season, he's going to give you, somewhere probably in the 20 to 25 minutes per game. And that's exactly what this team needs.
So I think more people than not, just sort of scanning Twitter, are happy with this addition. Some people think, he's, well past his prime, which obviously he is. And,
sure.
and, what he is defensively is sort of standing out most. And it's, did you need to do it? Does he even make you any better at all? What I will say to that, and I'm sure you agree with this, is, I don't know, obviously, like the list of potential MLE guys, if let's pretend the Gallinari signing hadn't happened yet, the list of MLE guys is running thin. Like, a lot of these guys are getting snatched up. I know as we chat, like TJ Warren's still out there, who's a guy I really would have liked to have seen here. Couple other guys are still out there, like a Dante DiVincenzo, I think, is still out there. There are some guys like that. It's not a long list, but if we live in this sort of alternative universe where it's like, well, you can spend the almost $6.5 million and get a Danilo Gallinari, or you could just like not spend it and not get anybody, or you could break it up into two, slightly making more than the vet minimum guys who aren't as impactful as a Gallinari. Like, you'll take this every day of the week. Like, it's still, a net positive to me, at least on the offensive.
Completely agree. It is funny because I'm saying the same thing. I was prepared when it broke, like, officially that it was happening. I was a little bit prepared to hear, all right, here's everybody, doom and gloom and angry. And I didn't get as much of that. And I think the ones who were, I think the challenge for this is it becomes a who else situation. And I'm with you. I like the idea of TJ Warren too. I do wonder if maybe the Celtics have concerns of, we don't know if he's going to be ready to go. Let's see, right? And if that's the case, I think there's going to be at least some pretty heavy management of Rob Williams as well as Al Horford throughout the course of the year. You add a third guy into that, that starts to become kind of hard to work around. One thing that we can say for Gallo, after getting through some injury issues, he stayed relatively healthy. Most of the games he's missed the last little bit is the last few years, at least, they've been more of the rest style. Or, as everybody kind of everyone missed some games due to COVID and the like.
Sure.
So I think this guy they're going to be able to pencil him in. No, all right, here's our minutes per game out of him, and off we go. The other thing I'll say too is how many years, I don't know if I've done it on your show or not, because I've done it, Lord knows, enough other places where we've ranted and raved and screamed that, why will they not spend money? Spend money. They just spent money. Like they could have very easily said, there's nobody we really like. Let's get a couple guys on the minimum, and roll it back. They've spent money. It sounds like they're still engaged on using the traded player exception on somebody. So, that part of it, I'm not going to sneeze at too. And go look at the free agent list. Sure, you can cherry pick a handful of guys you might like a little bit more, but boy, it's getting ugly really, really fast. So, I think they did well here to considering what they had to work with, the needs they had. I think they did a pretty good job with this signing.
Now, all of that being said, I'm curious what you think and even more so what based on who you've talked to, reached out to, your sources, all of that. I saw the Gallinari signing and fully recognizing what we've already talked about, like nobody at a little more than $6 million is the perfect player. I just don't believe, and this is not like informed, this is just my gut. I don't believe Danilo Gallinari was Brad Stevens' number one option, at least in terms of, like if on his wish list at, guys you could realistically get at that MLE money, and everybody's MLE money is a little bit different, but at that MLE money for Boston at $6+ million, I just don't believe that Danilo Gallinari was like, yes, this is our guy. This is number one. This is the guy we covet. Do you believe he was, or was there someone you think Brad would have wanted a bit more?
Yeah, I think once it became clear he was going to be available, which really crystallized after the trade with the Spurs, and that's, I think, being forgotten. He's been traded to the Spurs, and they're going to waive him. I think what this came down to was, I think he probably did at that point become a pretty priority target. I think there might have been maybe a couple guys ahead of him. I think maybe like an Otto Porter Jr. might have been ahead of him. A couple of the wings that went off the board. Maybe I'd heard just last week, maybe Victor Oladipo might have been somebody they could have gone after. But those guys all went for more than what the Celtics had to offer, money wise. And then, just to close the loop on it, because someone will invariably ask, well, couldn't you do a sign and trade into the Fournier TPE? And the answer is no, because that would have hard capped them and they wouldn't have been able to do that. And they're already above the tax apron as it is, so they wouldn't have been able to do that anyway. So they were really limited to using for a straight signing this taxpayer MLE, and it's about $4 million less. So we can't really blame a player, especially some of these veteran guys. These are guys who, like Otto Porter Jr., he's missed heavy amounts of time in his career. Go get your money, go get a little bit more money. He played on the minimum last year for the Warriors. So I'm not going to expect him to give up $4 million to.
Well, and it's not like he's ring chasing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, he's already done it. So yeah. So I think that's a another thing to put out there. I mean, Oladipo, you got $11 million from the Heat. So I fully get that. I don't think they were going to be in on guys like PJ Tucker or anybody like that, because they don't necessarily fill a real need.
What about like a Joe Ingles, somebody like that?
Yeah, and I think so. Joe Ingles and Ricky Rubio, right? I heard those two names mentioned over and over and over again. And Rubio got more because he got a longer deal from Cleveland. Ingles got basically 1 year at the taxpayer. But I think for Boston, it's those two guys aren't going to be available till sometime probably around late January, maybe February, because they're both coming off torn ACLs. So I think then you're basically saying, all right, hey, you guys liked our MLE signing? Here's Aaron Nesmith playing a bunch of minutes in the regular season because those guys can't play right now. And that's, and I'm not against the Aaron Nesmith playing thing, because if he's still on the roster, I'd like to see him get a reasonable shot. That's a whole other topic.
Sure.
But I think, I don't think they wanted to bring in a player where it was, hey, we signed this guy, we'll see in,
3 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 3 months into the season, 6 months, from the signing. Like, I think it was, hey, here's a guy, he's going to be there day one, and off we're going to go.
are the Celtics done? I don't mean, with respect to the TPE. I mean, straight up signings. Like, is Thomas Bryant at the veteran minimum going to happen? Is there another guy at the veteran minimum we should have our eyes on? Because obviously Boston is about out of money in that sense.
Yeah, I think I do think we probably have one more that minimum signing coming in. That could be impacted depending on how the TPE is used. If the TPE is used to, let's say they're just trading a pick for a player and the player's coming in and they're not sending a player out, that starts to impact the roster. The roster is starting to get a little bit filled up. You can go up to 20 in the offseason, which is, that's, good news from that respect. I've been told they have every intention of bringing Sam Hauser back. The reason they did the whole process of declining his option, making him restricted, is so they could add a second year onto that. They bring him back on a 2-year deal. So that sounds like that'll happen at some point here, probably after they're done with the bigger stuff. But that's the thing we're starting to watch now, is just roster spots just a little bit. But I do think we'll probably get another veteran minimum signing in there. I tend to think it probably will go towards a big man. I personally think Thomas Bryant would be a great get. This is a guy who he was really coming along nicely before the latest injury, and really starting to show some stuff as an offensive player. Again, not a lot of defense, but this team has defense in spades. So you can start to take some chances on some of these guys. But yeah, I do think we'll probably see one more veteran minimum signing, and then likely whatever they do with the traded player exception.
Well, and obviously you'll stagger, right? Like, you wouldn't put Gallinari and Bryant on the floor together.
Yeah, probably not very often.
Out of hand one way or the other.
Yeah. That's I like to call those Tuesday nights in Orlando, where in January, where
the home games for you.
Yeah. My home games where you really kind of throw those guys out there because, all right, back to back, Horford's getting the night off. We're just going to run some stuff. But yeah, probably very rarely they would play together. And the reality is, in the front court, if we look at it, Rob probably going to be around 30 minutes. I'd like to say Horford, let's limit him to 25. There's not a ton of big man minutes left there because we know Grant's going to play probably 25, 30 minutes a game. And then what you're really looking at is, all right, who can just jump in there for 10 minutes and not be a complete train wreck and just give us something on one end of the floor. I'm not so, completely out on the idea of it being Daniel Tice. I think people have gone a little too far with the Daniel Tice stuff now. He was very valuable in the Nets and Bucks series when Rob was working his way back and out in the Nets series. So I'm not fully out on Tice by any means. I do think there's more likelihood his contract is moved in some kind of trade, or that's the move to lessen the tax burden at some point down the line. But yeah, I do think, yeah, maybe Thomas Bryant, maybe somebody else. We'll see. One of my other favorite guys I would have brought in on the minimum, Robin Lopez, just because I think he's really good. He's solid, but I don't know that you want to double down with defense at that position behind Rob. Get somebody who's a little bit different. So the nights when, all right, hey, we're down 10, we need a little bit more offensive punch, you can go to Thomas Bryant for a few more minutes. Kind of the idea of what Ennis was supposed to be, but better. Right. That's I think
take much right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially right now for sure.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Because again, we spent a lot of time on the show last week. I was kind of on an island among our panel of guests, feeling like Boston should be prioritizing bringing in a big this offseason, not necessarily an overly impactful one, just to, again, sort of reduce the minutes load, reduce the workload on Al Horford and Rob Williams in particular, especially Horford, because, I just don't think, coming off of the year that he had in terms of, workload, minutes, extra 2 months, short off season, I don't, and again, he's a year older. He's 36 now. I don't think Al Horford is going to be nearly as good next year. Not a knock on Horford, just, age catches up with you when you play those kind of minutes. So like you said, I don't think it's realistic that he never plays more than 25 minutes in a game.
Yeah, I know he's obviously facetious.
No, of course. But if he could average 25 as opposed to 30, or 27 or something like that, that's a big step in the right direction.
You wanted breaking news, my friend.
Oh,
the Indiana Pacers are trading guard Malcolm Brogdon to the Boston Celtics.
All right.
All right. So this is not a TPE
what does
trade.
this mean?
This is not a TPE trade because he will not fit inside the TPE. So this is going to be something bigger.
Well, what is this? I mean, we'll get terms while we're still talking, I'm sure, but I mean, what does this mean to you in terms of like who's going the other way if a guy like Malcolm Brogdon's coming in?
I really don't know. I'm very, very interested to see who this comes. We'll see. Where this goes because I'm not sure. This is going to involve a pretty hefty salary going the other way because Brogdon makes over 22
I was just going to say, what's he making?
Yeah, he is at. Let me pull it up for you. He is at 22.6 million. So this is definitely not a TPE trade.
Well, and also you're not acquiring Malcolm Brogdon to come off your bench, right?
Probably not.
I mean, he's mostly a career starter, at least since he's earned that right after his first couple of years in Milwaukee. Almost 20 points a game last year. Looking at he's about 45% shooter, not a good 3-point shooter, obviously.
Challenge with Brogdon is health. It's always health with Malcolm Brogdon because he generally tends to struggle a little bit.
Is there any chance Marcus Smart went the other way in this deal?
It could be. I don't know. I like to think when this happens, Woj likes to do this, especially to the big markets.
To stagger
and then he sits for a second and laughs to himself. And he's like, let's see him all speculate. And then he'll push.
Let this breathe for a moment.
Daniel Tyson, Aaron Nesmith, and a 2023 first round pick.
Wow.
All right. That's
where do I sign?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that is
that's I can't believe that money even works.
Yeah, it should. No, that's not. Now you're gonna make me do math live on your show and look like
football. Brad, the number one takeaway right here is Brad is getting after it immediately. Like Brad, this isn't like this is win now mode stuff right here for Brad Stevens. You now have Marcus Smart, the Jays, obviously, Tatum and Brown.
There's got to be more in this deal, but what they can do is they can put in. Let's see, you could guarantee Nick Stauskas, Juwan Morgan, and that just about gets you there. So that's my guess.
Well,
look, here it is: Nick Stauskas, Malik Fitz, and Juwan Morgan. So basically, just cleared out the end of that bench vibes group.
That's what's happening. That latest group.
Yep.
I just saw it from Woj.
So the full terms will be Malcolm Brogdon to the Celtics for Daniel Tice, Aaron Nesmith, Nick Stauskas, Malik Fitz, Juwan Morgan, and a 2023 first round pick.
I mean, every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah.
There's. So
now, what's interesting here is this frees you up to be able to do something maybe with Peyton Pritchard if you wanted to. That's not going to get you a ton because now you've kind of got a lot of guards now with this. But this is this is something. So and this is it's funny. I don't know who said it. Maybe I was trying to see it. It scrolled by so quickly. It's Tom Westerholm. Great point. We all should have seen Brad Stevens trades for Malcolm Brogdon because he loves Malcolm Brogdon. And that is true. He has said that a million times in the past. So, yeah, it's huge. Look at that. We got to have a little fun live.
So, and you can't beat it. So, all right. I mean, for all the people that have been clamoring, like Celtics got to do something at point guard, you bring in Malcolm Brogdon now, and obviously you have more playmaking, a more traditional whatever point guard, like for anyone that I had zero problems with Marcus Smart, the point guard, but I know a lot of people out there for whatever reason did. But now you have again Smart, Eric White, Malcolm Brogdon, Peyton Pritchard's still on the roster. Obviously, I don't know if you got to clear one of those guys out just to create the minutes. Obviously, like where does this go from here? What does this look like if this is what the guard rotation is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, as you just kind of said, let's say the starting five returns intact. Now you're going to play Brogdon, White, and Pritchard off the bench. Maybe one of those guys can. None of those guys can really play the three. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So someone is going to lose out on some minutes here. With this. So, well, we'll see. That the good news for the Celtics, if I can say this too. I just want to make sure I'm trying to
Sure.
do math on the fly here for a second. But this is kind of salary neutral-ish if you were counting on Morgan, Stauskas, and Fitz staying, which somebody has to fill out roster spots
Right.
there. So this is they took on about $4 million. So in the TPE, the $17 million TPE still fully there for the Celtics to be able to use in this trade.
So it's just Brogdon going the other way.
That's what it's
Tice,
so far.
Smith, first round pick in 2023, Stauskas, Fitz, Morgan,
Yep.
all for Malcolm Brogdon. This is like it's not at all. I'm only making this comparison in terms of numbers. It's like the Kevin Garnett trade, where you're sending like
a little bit,
people the other way, to get one guy back.
Yep. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that is definitely true. I actually commented about that yesterday because I said, remember when Danny Ainge had to rebuild an entire bench? Because that trade, I think people forgot, it happened on July 31st. So the free agent market was basically picked clean at that point. And they were lucky James Posey had a contract snafu that he didn't like a deal with the Heat. And that ended up, or maybe the Heat, I think it was the Heat at the time, but that ended up freeing him up to be moved.
So again, obviously this has sort of sent us a little off course, but that's fine because this is now the news of the day. All apologies to Danilo Gallinari. Unfortunately, we already talked plenty about you, but what does this tell you? Like, I have been of the mind that Brad Stevens has done a almost surprisingly, quite frankly, like no disrespect intended, but he has done a tremendous job in his role as president of basketball operations. Like, some believe that, he should have been executive of the year last year. And obviously he was high up in the voting. But, I was looking back at this just a few days ago, and he's made, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but if I remember right, this will now be the 10th trade that he has made in his new role. And, in just a little over a year, obviously. And most of those have been minor and, salary dumping or cap clearing or whatever. But what I would argue is, and I think most people on the surface are going to immediately and rightfully so call this trade a win, but most trades that he has made, whether they've been wins or, like good for both sides. Like, I know you wrote the article last year, I think it was, about Danny Ainge, always trying to win trades, and other executives across the league, and, not wanting to get fleeced and got hesitant to work with him, and, on. And, how would that trickle down to Brad and his role? And obviously what was the role of Mike Zarin and all of that? Brad has not made a bad trade yet. There are some people out there that like Gary Washburn, who's on the show all the time, has been pretty vocal lately saying that he thought the Derek White trade was a bad trade. I don't agree. I think the Derek White trade at worst was an even trade, with the possibility to turn into a very good trade for Boston if obviously he's better next year. But obviously you gave up Richardson, you gave up a future first, all of that stuff. But I know I'm rambling, Keith, but I continue to be impressed with the role or the job that Brad has done in this role with regard to making trades. He's, at worst, they've been fair. At best, they've been lopsided wins. He's not made a bad deal yet.
Yeah, no, he really hasn't. This is, whether it's, you want to give all the credit to Brad or Mike Zarin and the staff, because this is probably, knowing Brad will say it was everybody but him, right? That's just the kind of guy he is. But this is, good stuff too, because people get hung up on the whole trading first round pick stuff. They're trying to win a championship. This is no longer about let's build for 3-4 years down the line. They want to win a championship this year. They were in game 6 of the NBA finals. We can even argue with a guy like Malcolm Brogdon to help with some of the execution. They probably win the title this a couple weeks ago. And now you're moving all this together as they kind of go all in with this. So this is, this is big time stuff. And Brad continues to nail these, trades, these picks and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, he is tough. Now, what I will say with Brogdon, one thing, he is very, very injury prone. He misses a lot of time. So that's something, but they've got enough guard depth to work around it, as we talked about. That's probably now why I don't think we'll see Peyton Pritchard moved, because it'll just be, hey, hang tight. Because we know Smart's going to miss 15, 20 games just with the way he plays. Brogdon will probably miss 15 to 20 games. Derek White tends to be a pretty healthy guy. Yeah, Peyton Pritchard, you've got enough depth to get by. Go get another big. I still ideally would like to see another wing, but let's see where that goes.
So Brogdon, 36 games last year, and he's never played. I'm 75 as a rookie.
I will say last year, sorry to interrupt you, Adam, but last year he was healthy enough to play at the end of the season, probably from February on, and he did not play a lot because the Pacers were, headed in a different direction.
But even to your point, in an average year, he plays in the neighborhood of 55 to 60.
Correct. Yep.
This from Jake Fisher, by the way, Bleacher Report writes, had heard Indiana was interested in Grant Williams, as the Pacers have been connected to a lot of forwards. For Boston to land Malcolm Brogdon without sacrificing Williams is a big win for the Celtics. As our guy Greeny, Dan Greenberg, tweeted, hardball Brad. Again, like people are going to look at this trade as a win regardless, even if Grant Williams, was in there instead of Daniel Tice or something like that. But the fact that it is, Grant sticking around, who, by the way, is not too far from a pretty sizable payday. But, the role that he played last year and consistent part of the rotation, the 3-point shooting, defensive reliability, all of that, to keep him really is a big, big win for Brad and the Celtics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, okay, go back to, let's rewind maybe, 20 minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah.
We were talking about minimums. Yeah, absolutely. Now they've got roster spots they've got to fill out. So now I do think, a guy like Thomas Bryant comes in. But here's the other thing that is maybe just in the overall rush excitement of all this. They just got Danilo Gallinari and Malcolm Brogdon without giving up a single rotation player. Two guys are coming in to fill out what was already a very strong 8-man rotation, and they didn't give up another rotation player in the deal.
Yeah.
That's hard to be upset with that, right?
Do you think we are heading in, whether it's Thomas Bryant or another big, because I was going to ask you this right before the trade news broke, with Daniel Tice now gone, like my question for you was going to be, all right, so if they add Bryant, is Daniel Tice on the move? Well, Daniel Tice is on the move. Yeah. Does that lead you to believe all the more so now that a big is coming in?
I do. You have to, because you got to be protected just with Rob's history. And I think, early in the season, they may take it very easy on him. We already talked about Al. Between those two, I do think you not that Grant's not a very good third big, but he's not a center sized guy. And we've seen that they've had issues when he's had to play the 5. So I do think you want to get another true 5 on the roster.
Matt Moore's out here tweeting they can roll out Brogdon, Smart, Jalen, Tatum, Horford. You have high-level shooters, elite defense, someone to actually get the offense organized so it doesn't melt into garbage. You can also roll out Brogdon, Smart, Tatum, Horford, Williams to combat double big units. You're basically dwarfing most teams in terms of size, length, and defense. Their options are pretty much infinite. Yeah. We talked about the team last year this way. How much more so is this true now?
My mind's spinning a little bit with lineup possibilities.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because I mean, Brad just gave email like, hey, you need offense, run this. You need defense, run that. You need this, do that. Like I mean, there is just there are infinite options here. You can do all sorts of stuff. And again, you still have enough depth coverage if one of these guys get hurt. Right, you're still in a pretty good position here. Again, you just, not to belabor the point, but you got these guys without giving up a single rotation guy,
right,
for you. So just massive.
So what's next, as you see it? Obviously filling out the bench is going to be important.
Yep.
Are we going to see again a couple of vet minimum guys? Is it going to be like that now like rookies like JD Davison all of a sudden isn't going to spend the whole year in Maine. He might actually, have a role at the end of Boston's bench. Like, what is the just, I don't expect you to do all the math on the fly, although
Sure.
I will tell you that Chris Forsberg tweeted, I want to pull
Yeah,
it up
they're
so
up
I can
around
read it
170
exactly.
million now.
Yeah, he
once they fill out the bench.
167 and a half for 11 players. So,
Yep.
who are the next four if the roster stays as it is right now, which Brad has certainly taught us in this show that it won't.
Yeah, I think I don't know that it's Thomas Bryant, but let's just say a big, a veteran big. I think they will add probably another wing, like a true like size wing, like someone who can play the three, just because they don't really have that. Then I think it's Sam Hauser, and then I think it's then from there you're really filling it out. One thing that's nice though now is they've got a bunch of roster spots and potential playing time, so they become probably one of the primary destinations for veteran ring chasers who are trying to catch on. So even if they don't do that today, this is something where months from now, when we're in the buyout market, you can start doing buyout stuff and all that. So I think they're in really really good shape.
So to reset the roster as we know it, Smart, Brown, Tatum, Horford, Rob Williams, your starters if nothing changes there.
Mhm.
Brogdon, White, Gallinari, Grant Williams, Hauser coming back, like you said, Peyton Pritchard. And obviously, you still do have the possibility of trades. I would never rule that out. And obviously, you have the TPE, which is a trade in and of itself. So let's, in the interest of time, let's get into the TPE. $17.1 million, the Fournier TPE. It expires on July 18th. So Brad Stevens and company, they've got a couple weeks to play around with this thing here. Many articles, including by yourself, have been written about the potential options. I know you were all about Kevin Herter. He's unavailable now. Some guys that, excuse me, I'm not saying these are the top targets, but guys that would fit anyway. B Rob wrote this, Brian Robb, Gary Trent, Duncan Robinson. I'm all out on Robinson, by the way. I don't want him. Norm Powell, Laurie Markkinen, Marcus Morris reunion. I don't see, but again, he fits. Malik Beasley, Doug McDermott, who a lot of people have mentioned, Luke Kennard, same story. Jordan Clarkson, Robert Covington. You also have Kyle Kuzma, who I would love to see here. Kelly Oubre. I don't think Josh Richardson, but Dwight Powell.
Yeah, Josh Richardson's not. He can't be reacquired.
Yeah, anyway. That's not going to happen. Terrence Ross, Dylan Brooks. I mean, the list goes on. There are a bunch of guys that make 17 million or less. Who, with Herter off the table, do you think is most realistic and should be the couple of top targets for the Celtics?
And I know no one's going to want to hear this. I don't know that they even use it now. Yes, they still have it. That's great. It's, good to have it for a couple more weeks. I just don't know with they will pay the tax. They've clearly made that, known. I don't know that they're going to go up to Warriors, Nets, Clippers levels of tax. That would be a massive jump in 1 year to the next. So I tend to think that probably now goes unused and they fill it out with minimums. They're not trying to be a party pooper and a wet blanket. I just don't see them really saying, we got to go, add another $15 million player to the roster. And a lot of those guys, they fit, but it doesn't seem like their teams really want to move those guys. So that's the other challenge you're working with too.
So do you actually think that, adding Malcolm Brogdon, especially doing so with giving nothing of real value up, adding Malcolm Brogdon makes it less likely now they use the TPE?
I do. I think at least that big one, right? That $17 million one. I just, we're even using, most of it. I'd say anything above maybe $5-6 million, they're probably out at this point.
I was going to spend more time on this, but I just don't think we need to, quite frankly.
Brad did our work for us.
The Kevin Durant discussion, all these articles being written about potential trades. My Twitter, my mentions are surprisingly split. Not 50-50, but whatever the percentage is. I didn't run a poll, but just based on the mentions, surprisingly split on whether or not the Celtics should be willing to part with Jaylen Brown. Again, wouldn't be straight up, but Jaylen Brown in a swap for Kevin Durant now that Durant obviously has requested a trade out of Brooklyn. I have been, pretty vocal on Twitter, or, whatever the written equivalent of that is, that I don't want to see that happen. I just don't. Durant is obviously one of the best players in the world still. He's, still a superstar, all-star, all of it. He's also about to be, 34 years old. He's 8 years older than Jaylen Brown. Yes, he has more time left on his contract, 3-4 years versus 2, so I understand people wanting to dive into that. I just think, well, one, I don't even know what, after this trade, I don't even know what you have that you'd be, able to give up to make the trade work in the filler around Jaylen Brown. But should Boston even really be entertaining this to, try to probably shorten the window, but expedite the championship?
Yeah, I tend to think in a vacuum, right? Obviously, it's Kevin Durant, right? He might have won the MVP last year if he didn't get hurt. Like, he was playing so absolutely incredible. So that part takes over. Then when you start to get into how do the Celtics make it happen? Because it's not gonna. I saw some people saying, why does everybody say it has to be Jaylen Brown? It could be Al Horford. The Nets aren't going to do that. Like, come on, the Nets need to get something of true value back for them where they're going to be going as a franchise. So that becomes Jaylen Brown. Here's where I'll say, if it was just Kevin Durant for Jaylen Brown, straight up, I would say you got to do it. Sure. Right? But it's not going to be. It's going to be Jaylen Brown plus. That right. plus is where it becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that's where I probably say, I think I'll walk away. Right? I think I'm going to go a different direction on this one. So that's my my thing with that is, just because I don't want to give up Jaylen Brown plus, and now who even knows if they have the ability to even kind of do that, right? It's right. We would have to see where all this would go.
Yeah, it's Jaylen, it's it's Grant, it's multiple future picks, it's it's somewhat, I don't even know what else. It's certainly not what like Shannon Sharp was putting out there with trading half your rotation for Kevin Durant. But
yeah,
one of the things that just sort of gives me pause, and like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I know, like nobody knows what 2 years from now is going to bring. How do you think Nets fans felt 2 years ago versus how they feel today? But there seem to be a lot of people that believe like, well, why are you so sure Jaylen Brown's going to re-sign in 2 years? And my response is always, why are you so sure he's not?
Yeah.
Like if you can, the comparison I made is, we all want, like, anyone's favorite team, like, you want to be the Warriors, right? So the Celtics are certainly built to be a team like the Warriors, like the, very early before their dynasty started. Like, you've got the young stars, you got a good bench, you got some veteran role players, you go and you hope it works out. If in 2 years, the next 2 years time, the Celtics are able to get over the hump, they are able to win the championship, of which, by the way, they were 2 wins away from last year. If they can do it, who's to say that Jaylen and Jason, don't say like, all right, let's keep going. Let's be like, Clay could have left. Clay decided, he got paid, obviously, but he decided to stick around and keep going. He didn't mind, being the number 2 or even being the number 3 when Kevin Durant got there. I don't know why people seem so sure that Jaylen Brown's going to want to leave and lead his own team, as opposed to, being right there on not superstar probably, but all-star level status with Jason Tatum.
Here's my thing. If this team is a finals contender, meaning they are truly actually in the mix to win the championship every year, which is either in the finals. I even put the conference finals in that mix, right? Because you're right there knocking on the door. I think that is, and then 2 years, they do that for the next 2 years. That locks in my opinion, that Jaylen Brown will re-sign, because one, you're right there, you're a title contender, and they can offer him way more money than anybody else will be able to.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things combined, that generally is enough. If he walks away from that at that point, then that's fair to say, all right, this is maybe could have been handled early. But the good news is, Brad Stevens has enough of an understanding, I think, in relationship with Jaylen Brown at this point, where if after next year, Jaylen Brown's like, not really sure this is where I want to be here, then you can move then, right? You can look at a trade at that point. They have plenty of time to do what they need to do. So I would, the whole Jaylen Brown can walk in 2 years. We get a little over the top with this stuff. It's like signed a contract and we're already talking about the next contract and where the guy's, leaving. I mean, let's breathe for a minute. There's time here.
Just we'll wrap this up in a minute. Sort of catching up on Twitter. Gary Washburn, Brad Stevens was able to clear out his ineffective bench and acquire another playmaker at the same time. It's obvious he doesn't value draft picks as much as his predecessor Danny Ainge. I think we've definitely learned that, between the Derek White trade, this trade, some other moves that have been made over the last year plus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Danny makes the Derek White trade. I don't know if he makes this trade either. Just because of the picks involved. And it's again, I don't care about first round picks when I'm a title contender. I just don't.
And I certainly don't. And maybe I'm in the minority, Keith. I don't ever care about second round picks.
I know. Yeah, that's
like I know that. Like I know that once in a very blue moon, like they'll turn into Nick Jokic. But for the most part, I just don't care.
Yep, I'm exactly with you. I don't care at all. They're just ballast in trades at this point. Yeah, sure. There might be a Jokic, there might be a Manu Ginobili, maybe there'll be a Isaiah Thomas, but yeah, that's once every 5-6 years that happens. And then you're one of 30 that you're going to get them anyway. So you're talking one out of every 150 second round picks that happens. Just move them on. That part I don't care about even remotely.
All right. Well, if I were you, I'd probably be sitting here for the last half hour twitching, wanting to get to work and react. So I'm gonna
Adam, you know me quite well. Yeah, I'm thinking, all right, I got it right. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do cap sheets. So yeah, you know me well.
Want to thank obviously Keith for hopping on and Evan for doing his thing behind the scenes. He'll have you next week. Maybe Kevin Durant gets traded in the next week's time. I do not believe, and I did not believe prior to the Brogdon trade either, that it will be to Boston, but I am fascinated to see what does happen in Brooklyn if one or both of those stars wind up being on the move. And then it just becomes Ben Simmons' team or Russell Westbrook's team or Anthony Davis's team or whatever, Bam Adebayo's team. I don't even know. We'll see what it ends up being. It's going to be pretty interesting. But Keith, again, thank you very much. Thanks for the real-time reaction. Hey, Celtics, when we started, they got Danilo Gallinari. We finished, they got Malcolm Brogdon. Celtics beat, baby. You got to love it.
Let's regroup tomorrow. Maybe we'll get Kevin Durant.
Let's do it. See you later.